The cameras were rolling in Judge Judy's courtroom on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning, but what nobody knew, not the audience, not the crew, not even the bailiff, was that this case would become the moment that nearly ended Judge Judy's legendary career. A woman walked through those courtroom doors wearing a Chanel suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, diamonds glittering on every finger, and an expression of pure contempt. She wasn't just any defendant. She was Catherine Whitmore, wife of one of the most powerful media executives in Los Angeles, a man who happened to sit on the board of the very network that aired Judge Judy's show. And Catherine knew it. She was being sued by Maria Santos, a housekeeper who claimed Catherine owed her $5,000 in unpaid wages. But this wasn't really about the money. Catherine had come to Judge Judy's courtroom with one purpose: to humiliate the judge on her own show, to prove that wealth and connections trump authority, and to send a message that even the great Judge Judy could be brought to her knees. What happened next wasn't just a courtroom showdown. It was a battle for dignity, respect, and the very soul of justice itself. Because hidden in Catherine's designer handbag was something that would change everything, evidence that could destroy Judge Judy's reputation forever. And she was waiting for exactly the right moment to use it. The room went silent as Judge Judy entered, completely unaware that she was walking into a trap that had been carefully set for her. This is the story of how one woman's arrogance almost destroyed an icon, and how Judge Judy fought back with nothing but her words, her wit, and an unshakable belief that in her courtroom, everyone, no matter how rich or powerful, would be held accountable. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Judge Judy took her seat behind the bench, adjusted her reading glasses, and looked down at the case file in front of her. She had presided over thousands of cases in her career, seen every kind of dispute imaginable, but something about the energy in the courtroom that morning felt different. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made even the audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Bailiff Bird stood at attention, his eyes scanning the room with the practiced vigilance of someone who had learned to sense trouble before it fully materialized. On the plaintiff's side sat Maria Santos, a 52-year-old housekeeper whose hands trembled slightly as she clutched a worn folder containing her evidence. Her clothes were clean but faded, the kind of outfit someone wears when they want to look presentable but can only afford so much. She had taken 2 buses to get to the courthouse that morning, leaving her second job early and risking the paycheck she desperately needed. Her daughter was starting college in the fall, and that $5,000 Catherine Whitmore owed her was supposed to cover the first semester's books and supplies. Now, sitting across from a woman dripping in wealth, Maria felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. Catherine Whitmore sat on the defendant's side with her legs crossed, one designer heel dangling carelessly from her foot. She wasn't looking at Judge Judy or Maria or anyone in particular. Instead, she was scrolling through her phone, her perfectly manicured fingers moving across the screen with the casual indifference of someone who considered this entire proceeding beneath her. Every few seconds, she would sigh loudly, as if the mere act of being present was an unbearable inconvenience. Her lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit who looked equally bored, sat beside her taking notes on a tablet. The audience members watched with growing discomfort. They had come to see Judge Judy deliver her trademark no-nonsense justice, but something about this situation felt off. The power dynamic was all wrong. Usually, Judge Judy was the authority, the one everyone feared and respected. But Catherine Whitmore wasn't showing fear. She was showing contempt. Judge Judy began with the standard opening. This is a case about unpaid wages. Ms. Santos, you claim that Mrs. Whitmore hired you to work in her Beverly Hills home for 3 months and failed to pay you the final $5,000 owed. Is that correct? Maria nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. I worked 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, cleaning her house, cooking meals, taking care of her children. She paid me for the first 2 months, but when the 3rd month ended, she said the work wasn't good enough and she wouldn't pay me. Judge Judy turned to Catherine. "Mrs. Whitmore, is this true? Did you hire Ms. Santos and refuse to pay her?" Catherine didn't look up from her phone. She waved her hand dismissively in the air, as if swatting away an annoying fly. The work was substandard. I have standards, and she didn't meet them. I don't pay for incompetence. The audience gasped. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it, with such casual cruelty that it made people's stomachs turn. Judge Judy's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure. "Mrs. Whitmore, when I'm asking you questions, I expect you to put down your phone and show this court the respect it deserves." Catherine finally looked up, but instead of putting the phone away, she smirked. "Respect?" She let the word hang in the air like a challenge. "I'm here, aren't I? What more do you want?" The courtroom went completely silent. Even Bailiff Bird, who had seen countless disrespectful defendants over the years, raised his eyebrows. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her voice measured but firm. "What I want is for you to follow the rules of this courtroom. Put the phone away. Now." Catherine rolled her eyes, made a big show of sighing again, and slowly, deliberately placed her phone on the table in front of her, screen up, as if to signal that she was merely humoring this ridiculous request. "Happy now?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Judge Judy didn't respond to the provocation. Instead, she turned her attention back to Maria. "Ms. Santos, do you have documentation of your employment agreement with Mrs. Whitmore?" Maria opened her folder with shaking hands and pulled out a handwritten contract. "Yes, Your Honor." She wrote this herself and signed it. "It says I would be paid $1,700 per month for 3 months. I have the first 2 payments deposited in my bank account, but the third payment never came." She passed the contract to the bailiff, who brought it to Judge Judy. As the judge examined the document, Catherine let out a loud, exaggerated yawn. She stretched her arms above her head, looked around the courtroom with bored amusement, and then leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer. He nodded and whispered back. They both smiled, the kind of smile that said they knew something nobody else did. Judge Judy looked up from the contract. "This appears to be a valid agreement, Mrs. Whitmore. Your signature is right here. You agreed to pay Ms. Santos $1,700 per month. That's a legally binding contract." Catherine shrugged. "I changed my mind. I'm allowed to change my mind. Besides, she should be grateful I paid her anything at all. Do you know how many people would love to work in a house like mine? She should consider it an honor." The audience members looked at each other in disbelief. Some shook their heads. Others whispered to their neighbors. This wasn't just arrogance. This was something darker, a complete disregard for another human being's dignity and livelihood. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, refusing to break down in front of this woman who had already taken so much from her. Judge Judy set the contract down and folded her hands on the bench. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that the regular viewers of her show recognized immediately. It was the edge that came right before the storm. "Mrs. Whitmore, a contract is not something you can simply change your mind about because you feel like it. When you sign an agreement, you are legally obligated to fulfill your end of the bargain. That's how the law works." Catherine leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "The law." She laughed, a short, sharp sound that cut through the courtroom like a knife. "Let me tell you something about the law, Judge. The law works for people like me. People with money, with connections, with power. You think you're going to rule against me? You think you're going to side with some housekeeper over me?" She paused, letting her words sink in, and then she smiled that dangerous smile again. "My husband is Richard Whitmore. Maybe you've heard of him. He sits on the board of this network. The network that pays your salary. So before you make any decisions here, you might want to think very carefully about whose side you're on." The courtroom erupted. Audience members gasped out loud. The bailiff straightened up, his eyes narrowing. Maria covered her mouth with her hand, shocked that someone would openly threaten a judge. And Judge Judy, for the first time in her long career, felt something she hadn't felt in decades. She felt cornered. Catherine Whitmore had just publicly reminded everyone in that room that Judge Judy wasn't untouchable, that her authority could be challenged, that her job could be threatened. And the worst part was, Catherine was right. Richard Whitmore did sit on the network board. He did have the power to make her life very difficult. For a brief moment, Judge Judy's face showed something the audience had never seen before, uncertainty. Catherine saw it too, and her smile widened. She reached down, pulled her designer handbag onto her lap, and patted it gently, as if reminding Judge Judy that she still had her secret weapon waiting. The trap had been sprung, and now Judge Judy had to decide, would she back down to protect her career, or would she stand up for what was right and risk everything she had built? The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Catherine Whitmore sat there with that smug smile plastered across her face, confident that she had just won. She had played her trump card, reminded everyone who really held the power, and now all she had to do was wait for Judge Judy to fold. The audience members sat frozen, barely breathing, waiting to see what would happen next. Maria Santos looked down at her hands, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She had come here hoping for justice, but now it seemed like even the great Judge Judy couldn't help her. The rich really did always win. Bailiff Bird shifted his weight, his hand resting near his side, ready for whatever might come next. He had seen Judge Judy face down criminals, liars, and con artists, but he had never seen anyone threaten her job so openly, so brazenly. For what felt like an eternity, Judge Judy said nothing. She simply stared at Catherine Whitmore, her face unreadable, her hands still folded on the bench in front of her. The cameras captured every second of this moment, the silence stretching so long that viewers at home would later say they thought their television had frozen. Then, slowly, deliberately, Judge Judy removed her reading glasses. She set them down on the bench with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than it should have. She leaned back in her chair, never breaking eye contact with Catherine, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried across the courtroom like thunder. Mrs. Whitmore, I've been doing this job for over 25 years. In that time, I've seen thousands of cases and dealt with every kind of person you can imagine. The liars, the cheaters, the bullies, the manipulators. But what I haven't seen very often, and what I certainly don't tolerate, is someone who comes into my courtroom and thinks they can intimidate me by throwing around names and connections. Catherine's smile faltered slightly, but she tried to maintain her composure. I'm just stating facts, Judge. My husband does sit on the board. That's not a threat, that's reality. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. Let me tell you what reality is, Mrs. Whitmore. Reality is that you signed a contract with Ms. Santos. Reality is that she fulfilled her end of the agreement, working 10-hour days, 6 days a week, in your home. Reality is that you owe her money that she earned through her labor. Those are the facts that matter in this courtroom, not who your husband knows or what board he sits on. The audience members started to sit up a little straighter. This was the Judge Judy they knew, the one who didn't back down from anyone. But Catherine wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her voice taking on a sharp edge. With all due respect, Judge, I think you're forgetting your place here. This isn't your courtroom. This is a television show. A show that exists because networks decide it exists. And networks listen to people who write the checks. She paused, letting that sink in. So maybe you should think less about contracts and more about your future. Because I promise you, if you rule against me today, there will be consequences. My husband will make sure of that. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Even Catherine's own lawyer looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat as if he wanted to disappear. Judge Judy raised her hand, silencing the room instantly. When she spoke again, her voice was steady, measured, but there was steel in every word. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to give you one warning, and one warning only. In this courtroom, I don't care if your husband is on a network board, I don't care if he's the President of the United States. And I don't care what consequences you think you can manufacture. When you walk through those doors, you are subject to the same rules as everyone else. No one, and I mean no one, is above the law in here. Catherine laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You really think you're untouchable, don't you? You really think your little TV show gives you that much power? She reached down and placed her hand on her handbag again, that mysterious bag that she had been guarding so carefully. I came prepared today, Judge. I have something in here that will change your mind very quickly. Something that will make you realize you're not as powerful as you think you are. Judge Judy's expression didn't change, but for the briefest moment, something flickered in her eyes. Concern. Fear. The audience couldn't tell. Catherine saw it though, and her confidence came roaring back. That's right, she continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction. I know things about you, Judge Judy. Things that, if they came out, would ruin everything you've built. Your reputation, your show, your legacy, all of it could disappear with one phone call. She patted the handbag gently, almost lovingly. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to dismiss this case. You're going to tell that housekeeper that she has no claim, and then we're all going to walk out of here and pretend this never happened. Because if you don't, I will destroy you. Maria let out a small sob. The audience sat in stunned silence. Bailiff Bird took a step closer to the bench, as if preparing to intervene. And Judge Judy, the woman who had built an empire on being unshakable, sat there facing the biggest threat of her career. Catherine Whitmore had the power to end everything, and she knew it. The question now was whether Judge Judy would sacrifice her principles to save her legacy, or whether she would stand firm and risk losing everything she had worked for. The entire courtroom waited for her response, and somewhere in America, millions of viewers held their breath, wondering if this was the day that Judge Judy finally met her match. But before we see how Judge Judy responds to this career-ending threat, if you love seeing entitled people get exactly what they deserve, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell right now. Because what happens next is the most legendary moment in courtroom television history, and you won't want to miss a single second. Now, let's see Judge Judy fight back. The moment stretched on, tension coiling tighter and tighter like a spring ready to snap. Catherine Whitmore sat there, smug and confident, her hand still resting on that designer handbag, certain that she had cornered Judge Judy into submission. Maria Santos wiped her tears, resigned to defeat. The audience held its collective breath. And then, something remarkable happened. Judge Judy's face changed. Not with fear, not with worry, but with something else entirely, a cold, calculated anger that the veteran court watchers in the audience recognized immediately. It was the look she got when someone had finally pushed her too far, when someone had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She leaned forward slowly, her elbows resting on the bench, her fingers interlaced, and when she spoke, her voice cut through the courtroom like a blade through silk. Mrs. Whitmore, I want to make sure I understand you correctly. You came into my courtroom today, not to defend yourself against a legitimate lawsuit, but to threaten me. To intimidate me. To try to blackmail me into abandoning my principles and denying justice to a woman who worked honestly and deserves to be paid for that work. Is that an accurate summary of what just happened here? Catherine's smile widened. She thought this was Judge Judy surrendering, asking for clarification before backing down. That's exactly right, Judge. I'm glad you're finally understanding how things work in the real world. Judge Judy nodded slowly, as if considering this. Then she picked up her pen, made a note on the paper in front of her, set the pen down, and looked directly into Catherine's eyes with an intensity that made the temperature in the room seem to drop 10 degrees. Well then, let me tell you how things work in my world, Mrs. Whitmore. In my courtroom, threats don't work. Intimidation doesn't work. And blackmail definitely doesn't work. What does work is evidence, facts, and the law. 3 things you seem to have forgotten exist. Catherine's smile began to fade. She tried to interrupt, "Now wait just a minute," but Judge Judy's hand shot up, silencing her instantly. "I'm talking now. You've had your turn, and you used it to threaten me and insult this court. Now you're going to sit there, be quiet, and listen to what I have to say." The authority in Judge Judy's voice was absolute, and for the first time since walking into the courtroom, Catherine Whitmore looked uncertain. Judge Judy stood up from her chair, something she rarely did, and the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. She was no longer just a judge behind a bench. She was a force to be reckoned with. You think because your husband sits on a board somewhere that you're untouchable. You think wealth and connections put you above the law. You think you can treat hardworking people like Maria Santos as if they're beneath you, as if their labor, their dignity, their humanity means nothing. And then you have the audacity to come into this courtroom and threaten me, thinking I'll just roll over because I'm afraid of losing my job. Judge Judy walked around the side of the bench, stepping down from the elevated platform, moving closer to where Catherine sat. The bailiff tensed slightly, but Judge Judy waved him off. She wasn't going to do anything physical, her words were weapon enough. "Let me tell you something, Mrs. Whitmore, something that clearly nobody in your privileged life has ever had the courage to tell you. Money doesn't make you better than anyone else. Power doesn't give you the right to abuse people. And connections don't protect you from being held accountable for your actions. You signed a contract with Ms. Santos. She fulfilled every obligation under that contract. You refused to pay her, not because the work was inadequate, but because you simply didn't want to. Because you thought you could get away with it. Because people like you always think you can get away with it." The courtroom was completely silent except for Judge Judy's voice, which rang out clear and unwavering. Catherine tried to reach for her handbag again, tried to pull out whatever damaging evidence she claimed to have, but Judge Judy pointed directly at her. "Don't you dare. Don't you dare try to threaten me again. I don't care what you think you have in that bag. I don't care what secrets you think you know. I don't care what phone calls your husband can make. Because here's the truth that you need to understand, my integrity is not for sale. My principles are not negotiable. And I will not, under any circumstances, let someone like you make me abandon what is right just because you have money and connections." Catherine's face had gone from smug to shocked to angry to something approaching panic. She looked at her lawyer, who was staring at his tablet, refusing to make eye contact. She looked at the audience, hoping for support, but found only faces filled with approval for Judge Judy and disgust for her. She was losing control of the situation, and she knew it. Judge Judy returned to her bench, sat down, and picked up her gavel. Her voice became formal, judicial, but no less powerful. "Mrs. Whitmore, you came here today thinking you could buy your way out of justice. You thought your threats would make me cave. But the only thing you've accomplished is showing everyone in this courtroom, everyone watching at home, exactly what kind of person you really are. You're a bully. You're someone who uses wealth as a weapon and connections as a shield. And today, in this courtroom, that ends." She paused, letting her words sink in, and then delivered the line that would be replayed millions of times across the internet. "You want to threaten my career? Go ahead. You want to call your husband? Be my guest. You want to try to destroy me? Give it your best shot. Because I would rather lose everything I've built than compromise my integrity for 1 second to protect myself from someone like you. Justice isn't for sale in my courtroom, Mrs. Whitmore. And today, justice is coming for you." The courtroom erupted in applause. Maria Santos looked up, hope flooding back into her eyes. Bailiff Bird allowed himself a small smile. And Catherine Whitmore sat there, her mouth hanging open, realizing that she had just made the worst miscalculation of her life. She had poked a bear, and now that bear was done being patient. Judge Judy picked up the gavel, and the weight of it in her hand felt heavier than usual, not because of the wood and metal, but because of what it represented in this moment. This wasn't just about $5,000. This was about whether justice could survive in a world where the wealthy believed they could buy their way out of consequences. She looked at Maria Santos, whose tear-stained face now showed something it hadn't shown in months: hope. Then she looked at Catherine Whitmore, whose arrogance had finally cracked, revealing the panic underneath. "I find in favor of the plaintiff, Maria Santos," Judge Judy declared, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "Mrs. Whitmore, you are ordered to pay Ms. Santos the full amount of $5,000 in unpaid wages, plus an additional $2,000 in damages for the emotional distress you have caused her, plus all court costs. Total judgment, $7,000. She slammed the gavel down with such force that it echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. "Furthermore, Mrs. Whitmore, your behavior in this courtroom today has been reprehensible. You came here not to defend yourself, but to intimidate, threaten, and attempt to corrupt the judicial process. That will not be tolerated." Catherine shot up from her chair, her face flushed red with rage and humiliation. "This is outrageous. I will appeal this. My husband will hear about this. You haven't heard the last from me." Judge Judy didn't even flinch. She simply stared at Catherine with the calm confidence of someone who had already won. "Mrs. Whitmore, you can appeal to anyone you want. You can call your husband, call the network president, call the governor, for all I care. But that judgment stands, and you will pay every penny you owe Ms. Santos. Now get out of my courtroom." Catherine grabbed her designer handbag, the one that supposedly contained the damaging evidence she had threatened to use, and stormed toward the exit. Her lawyer scrambled to gather his things and follow her. As she reached the door, she spun around one last time. "You're finished, Judge Judy." "Finished," she screamed. Then she slammed the door so hard that the sound reverberated through the entire courthouse. The moment she was gone, the courtroom transformed. The audience erupted into thunderous applause, people rising to their feet in a standing ovation. Maria Santos collapsed into sobs of relief and gratitude, covering her face with her hands as her entire body shook. Judge Judy stepped down from the bench again and walked over to Maria, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did good today," she said quietly, her voice soft now, stripped of the steel it had carried moments before. "You stood up for yourself. You didn't back down. And you won. Hold your head high." Maria looked up at Judge Judy through her tears and whispered, "Thank you. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means to me." Judge Judy nodded, gave her shoulder one more reassuring squeeze, and then returned to her bench. As the cameras continued to roll, capturing every second of this moment, nobody in that courtroom knew yet that this case would become viral within hours, that Judge Judy's stand against Catherine Whitmore would be shared millions of times, that this would become the defining moment of her legendary career. All they knew was that today, justice had won. And sometimes, that's enough. Within 2 hours of the episode airing, the clip had already been uploaded to YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and every social media platform imaginable. By the end of the day, it had been viewed over 5 million times. By the end of the week, that number had climbed to 50 million. People couldn't get enough of watching Judge Judy stand up to Catherine Whitmore, of seeing a powerful woman refuse to be intimidated by wealth and connections, of witnessing real justice delivered to someone who desperately needed it. The comment sections exploded with support. "This is why we love Judge Judy," one person wrote. "She doesn't care how rich you are or who you know. Right is right and wrong is wrong." Another comment read, "I've been working minimum wage jobs my whole life and had bosses try to cheat me out of pay. Seeing Maria get justice made me cry." Thousands of people shared their own stories of being mistreated by employers, of being made to feel small by people with power, of wishing they had someone like Judge Judy to stand up for them. If this story is giving you all the feels and you're loving how Judge Judy delivered justice, smash that like button right now. And drop a comment below telling us about a time you witnessed someone entitled getting exactly what they deserved. We read every single comment, and we want to hear your stories. Now, let's talk about what happened next. But the impact went far beyond social media. News outlets picked up the story. CNN ran a segment about it. Fox News devoted an entire discussion to the question of whether wealth gives people a sense of entitlement that corrupts basic human decency. The Atlantic published an essay titled "Judge Judy and the American Dream: Why We Need Authority Figures Who Can't Be Bought." The case became a cultural touchstone, a moment that people referenced when talking about justice, integrity, and standing up for what's right even when it costs you something. What nobody expected was what happened 3 days after the episode aired. Richard Whitmore, Catherine's husband and the network board member she had used as a threat, released a public statement. In it, he apologized for his wife's behavior, stated that he had no prior knowledge of her plans to use his name as leverage, and confirmed that he would never, under any circumstances, attempt to influence the content or rulings of Judge Judy's show. He praised Judge Judy for her integrity and announced a personal donation of $50,000 to a charity that provides legal assistance to low-income workers facing wage theft. The statement concluded, "My wife's actions do not represent our family's values, and I am deeply embarrassed by what occurred in that courtroom." The network released their own statement shortly after, making it clear that Judge Judy's position was secure, that they supported her completely, and that they were proud to have someone of her character representing their programming. Catherine Whitmore, humiliated and exposed, deleted all her social media accounts and retreated from public life. Maria Santos, meanwhile, used the money from the judgment to pay for her daughter's college textbooks and started a small advocacy group to help other domestic workers know their rights and stand up against wage theft. She credited Judge Judy with changing her life, not just financially, but emotionally. "Before that day, I felt invisible," Maria said in an interview a month later. "I felt like people like me didn't matter. But Judge Judy showed me that everyone matters. That justice isn't just for rich people. That standing up for yourself is worth it, even when you're scared." The lesson was clear and powerful: integrity cannot be bought, intimidated, or threatened into submission. Judge Judy had proven that true authority comes not from wealth or connections, but from an unwavering commitment to doing what is right, regardless of the cost. Years have passed since that unforgettable day in Judge Judy's courtroom, but the impact of that moment continues to resonate. Judge Judy has presided over thousands more cases since then, but when people are asked about their favorite Judge Judy moment, Catherine Whitmore's name comes up again and again. It wasn't just about the satisfaction of watching an entitled person get put in their place, though that was certainly part of it. It was about something deeper, something that touched a nerve in millions of people who had felt powerless at some point in their lives. Judge Judy proved that day that no amount of money, no powerful connection, no threat or intimidation could make her abandon her principles. She showed that integrity is not a luxury that only those without anything to lose can afford. It's a choice that everyone must make, especially when the stakes are highest. Maria Santos still watches Judge Judy every day. She says it reminds her that she found her voice that day in court, and that voice has never gone quiet since. Her daughter graduated from college with honors and now works as a labor rights attorney, inspired by her mother's courage and Judge Judy's example. Catherine Whitmore was never seen in public again, a cautionary tale about what happens when arrogance and entitlement collide with accountability. And that mysterious handbag? The one she kept patting, the one that supposedly contained evidence that could destroy Judge Judy's career? It turned out to be a bluff, nothing more than a desperate attempt to manipulate and control. There was never any damaging evidence. There was only a woman who had never been told no in her life, finally meeting someone who couldn't be bought, threatened, or broken. Judge Judy's legacy isn't just in the judgments she's delivered or the cases she's ruled on. It's in the message she sends every single day to everyone watching, that justice matters, that integrity matters, that standing up for what's right matters, even when it's hard, even when it's scary, even when everything is on the line. This story proves that character will always beat cash, and courage will always triumph over corruption. If Judge Judy's stand inspired you today, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story of justice being served. Drop a comment and tell us what your favorite Judge Judy moment is, and smash that like button if you believe that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, should be above the law. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the court of life, we all have to answer for our choices. Make sure yours are worth defending.